Help support the show by going to the Amazon.com search bar on the FBIA podcast webpage when doing your online shopping. From movies to groceries, Amazon has everything. Go to the website and use our show's search box to help send 10% of your purchase to the show. The search box will take you right back to the Amazon webpage. No extra cost to you, just support for the show. Again, that's FBIApodcast.com and look for the search box just under our logo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Football is America with Ron and Kyle. I'm Ron.
And I'm Kyle. Today we are joined by Dan Lalich, staff writer for DawgsByNature.com, which is the Browns team and blog page, part of the fantastic SB Nation community. Dan is here with us today to discuss the Cleveland Browns, the 2014 season, and a little bit of 2015, what we can be looking forward to. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was definitely a roller coaster year, a lot of fun. But first, we want to know a little bit about yourself. How long have you been a fan of the Cleveland Browns?
You know, that's a tricky situation. I'm at a weird age where when I was at the age where people are typically picking up their sports fandom was right when the Browns moved out of Cleveland to Baltimore. So I'd like to say, I've been a Browns fan my whole life, which is true to some extent, but, I wasn't really even that aware of the Browns until I was maybe, 10, 11 years old. But, at least since then, I've just been soaking up football.
Definitely rough when the home team leaves town. I grew up in L.A., so it was one of those Rams, Raiders? Oh, maybe not. All right.
Well, you might be getting another team soon.
I live in Alaska now, so it's whatever. I've made my choices. I do what I do now. It's fine. Nobody cared about the Rams and Raiders when they were in LA anyway, so let them come back. Who cares? Now, what is it that drove you to be a professional? Is it just pure fanaticism, wanting to connect more with the community of fans? What was the motivation there for you?
Well, for me personally, we do have a lot of guys who I guess you could call professional in that they get paid for doing it. But I actually am totally volunteer on the site, and it just started from, I loved football. I loved the Browns so much that I just spent so much time writing about it that eventually Chris, who is the head guy at Dogs by Nature, invited me on to join the staff. And so that's, for me, it's just a totally been a passion thing. It's just what I love to do.
Since you started being a fan, like right when the team left town, there's probably not a whole lot of great memories, but can you tell us what is your strongest memory of being a Browns fan?
That's a funny one.
Yeah, I didn't think we were getting something deep and emotional. It was going to be something like, well, here's a story you tell at the bar.
Yeah, so the strongest memory I have, and it's, as far as post 1999 Browns memories go, I guess it's a positive one. But in 2002, that was the last time the Browns made the playoffs, and that whole year was just crazy, up and down, come from behind victories. And then the playoff game was against the Steelers, so, the big rival. And Kelly Holcomb came in, as he had done a couple other times during the season, but he started the playoff game, and he threw for like 400 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, and the whole game was, down to the wire, and they ended up losing, but as the Browns often do. But it was still, just that excitement, that feeling of playoff football is probably, for someone who didn't really get to experience the heyday of the Browns, that's probably been my most positive experience with the team.
If it is any consolation, when we asked the same sort of question of Jaguars beat writer, it was also like, well, there was that time we made the playoffs, that was good, and then we asked, what about anything recent? He's like, oh God, no. So you are not alone there, and That is a special sort of thing for Cleveland fans, just that permeating misery. That's an unfortunate reality of it.
You learn to enjoy it, though. It's hard to describe to people.
It's like, no, this is our misery. You can't have any of it. It's mine. I own it. Like, all right, fine. I guess I can't even make jokes.
We take great pride in being the most miserable team.
You say that with such a sadness to your voice. Oh, it's just that acceptance.
Hey, LeBron's back, though.
You always have the Cavs to look forward to.
They are tearing it up right now. That is true. Damn right.
Let's get into the 2014 season here. Big time roller coaster, mostly because it just went way up in the beginning and then dropped. So I would say it's more like, a failing rocket, to be honest. But a lot of ups, real early on, and then it just seemed to just all come crashing down. The surprising emergence of Brian Hoyer at the beginning, and then Johnny Manziel comes out and just has a terrible start to his career. So with so many changes in emotion on the year, can you tell us if this season was it a success or not?
So, yeah, there are a couple ways to answer that, I guess. I think overall, I think it was a success. Last offseason, as strange as the season was, the offseason was even stranger.
Definitely.
Things were nuts. We fired a coach after one season, Rob Chudzinski, and then we hired the new coach, Mike Pettin, and then immediately fired the two guys who had hired him. And so from that standpoint, that was probably the low point. And even though Mike Pettin, there's speculation out there, he wasn't exactly the first guy on the list, it's really hard to be disappointed with the results he was able to get out of the team. I think, bad teams will often talk about getting a culture change. You have to instill that winning culture. You have to make losing unacceptable. And maybe this is just the eternal off-season optimism, but I really think Mike Pettin has done the best job of that of any coach in recent Browns history. And that started with guys like, Dante Whitner and Carlos Dansby, who came from teams where they were used to winning. And those guys sort of took on a leadership role, especially on the defense, where it became now, you were expected to go about your business. We expect to win games. It's not we hope to win games. From the culture change standpoint, which is really, when you have a team that's been as bad as the Browns, you really have to start from the ground up like that. So I think from that standpoint, the season was a success, even if it didn't end as well as, we might have hoped.
And definitely Mike Pettin is, I'm guessing, the biggest positive you have entering this next year. As you said, there was so much confusion. It was pretty clear that the management wanted Adam Gase. They were holding out in the same way that the Falcons did this year, didn't get their guy. Then it's like, well, we'll bring Pettin back, I guess. And so there was zero confidence, all that weirdness at the beginning of the year. He won't name a starting quarterback in the preseason. It almost seemed like he wasn't allowed. And yet a lot of success. And he's refreshingly honest for a head coach in that he tells it about as honestly as he can. And that's got to be a nice sort of change of pace for the fans to see a guy go out there and maybe he's not being dealt with as honestly as he would like by, in between him and management, but he is definitely doing some things right and being honest with the fans and the media.
Yeah, he's been really, really refreshing from that standpoint. Pat Shermer is not the most charismatic guy in the world, and he was, in there before Chudzinski. And then Chudzinski, he wasn't bad with the media, but he wasn't the most interesting interviewer press conference in the world. But Mike Pettin does a great job of being engaging, making sure he's getting his point across but also, telling that line of, not saying too much, because, in the media, we all complain about coach speak a lot, about how coaches or management will talk a lot without really saying anything. But Pettin does feel like he's giving you some real information. He's trying to be as honest with you as he can, but without sort of going overboard, which has been really nice.
It's refreshing, I think, in that, as you said, the media is going to twist what you say and kind of lead people into traps. And he's doing a good job of not falling for it. That doesn't necessarily make him secure, though. As good as the team did in a lot of ways, the end of the year was definitely a letdown. And I've got to wonder, do you believe that he is in any danger of losing his job this next year? I mean, if it's another disappointing year, could he be gone already?
So I would like to say, of course not. And I really do think, unless they only win like 2 games, I think he'll be back. But Jimmy Haslam isn't shy about turnover. You know, he's on his 3rd head coach in 3 years. I hope at least he's learned his lesson, and given especially the way, you know, the public and the team seem to respond to Pettine, I think almost definitely he'll be around next year unless, you know, they go 0-16 or something. I think a lot of the disappointment at the end of the season was attributed to, you know, obviously Johnny Manziel clearly wasn't as prepared as he needed to be, and a lot of strange things happening with Kyle Shanahan, who is now, you know, been kicked out kind of, or left of his own accord. However that situation actually happened, I don't think we'll ever know. But I think people are confident in Pettine and what he's been able to do so far. So I think it would take sort of a catastrophic failure for him to not be back.
It is definitely, I'm guessing, the hope that he'll be back. Anytime you can get stability out of the head coaching position, it makes a whole lot of the environment and culture in the locker room a bit more stable and definitely more consistent to develop the identity of the players you draft and the team itself. Now, speaking of drafting and inconsistency, however, you know what's coming, so let's just jump right into it. The curse of pick 22. I don't know. I mean, at this point, you can't do it anymore. You can't. If the Browns draft a quarterback at pick 22, there's no way I imagine any fans think anything good is going to happen, because there's Brady Quinn, Brandon Weeden, and now Johnny College Football, all of which drafted with the 22 overall, all of which very, very disappointing. Hitting the checklist, one of the worst debuts in NFL history. Rehab after the season. Preseason, he was partying in Vegas with Gronkowski and passing out on inflatable swans. I mean, you add that with the fact that he ran a kind of gimmicky college offense. At this point, you've got a lot of data on him that is not good. Are the fans still excited? I mean, is there any hope that he's going to turn it around, or are you just waiting for the next quarterback to add to that jersey?
You know, since he was drafted, and even before that, Manziel's very divisive. But I think, especially with how the offseason's gone, most fans seem ready to say that, okay, you know, if Manziel is really cleaned up, if he looks good in the offseason workouts and things, you know, the physical talent is still there. He was still, you know, on the field when he knows what he's doing. He still looks like he could be a good football player. So there's no reason to completely give up. At the same time, I don't think, you know, nobody's going to put their life savings on that. Nobody is getting the bus ready down in Canton. So I think,
nice.
I think some people probably would like to just move on already, but that doesn't seem to be the direction the team is going. And I think, given that most of his problems seem to be off the field, and it was probably those problems that were then manifesting on the field, the fact that he's gone to rehab, tried to clean his life up, if he comes back a different person, there's still a chance that the pick could work out.
There's not necessarily this intrinsic hope that, hey, he's got everything. It's more the hope of, well, he's on our roster. We'd much rather he be a talented contributor than taking up a roster spot.
Right. It's more of a, you know, we don't really want to cut him or anything. Like, we can't totally get rid of him yet, but it wouldn't hurt to have a backup plan, like that kind of thing. Very different from when, you know, when Brady Quinn was drafted, you know, everybody thought we were set for the next decade. Nobody really feels that way with Johnny Manziel.
But did they, when it's the pre-draft part of last year and he's doing all his workouts and he's got George Bush and he's in the pads and it's weird and awkward. And I remember at one point he even said, I have no problem going to the dog pound. That's fine. And then Cleveland fans just sort of ran with it. I mean, was the hope for him coming in, was that legitimate hope in his skill set, or is that just the hope of a team that really, really, really needs a quarterback?
So I think it's a little of both. Manziel, a lot of his college reputation wasn't on that he was your prototypical quarterback. It was just that occasionally he would do something incredible on a football field, that he just somehow intrinsically, the game seemed easy for him. And obviously, that still takes a lot of work, as we saw in professional football, but it seemed like he was just a guy who understands how to make plays. And that's a hard thing to quantify. It's a hard thing to show up in a scouting report. So I think for a fan base that really hasn't had the chance to root for a lot of playmakers, a lot of people were on board from the beginning. Let's go get this guy. He's going to drag us kicking and screaming to winning seasons and all that kind of stuff. Whereas at the same time, there were still, a large number of fans, it was probably 50-50, who wanted nothing to do with him, who thought he was, way too short and came from a gimmicky offense and was never going to be any good. I don't think there was a whole lot of middle ground. I think there were a lot of people who were really gung-ho Johnny football and a lot of people who wanted nothing to do with him, and nobody who really felt, yeah, okay, maybe we can try that.
Which is essentially the same way that he was being scouted. I mean, a lot of the NFL analysts were saying this kid will change the way we play the game. And a lot of people were saying this kid will make us all laugh really, really hard. And I mean, there was not a lot of middle ground. There was not a lot of, well, he'll be a good journeyman for a few years. And no, it was either a spectacular flame out or total success. My personal hope was that he would flame out and then he and Tim Tebow would go ahead and create a crazy Dukes of Hazzard style show all centric around football.
I'd watch that.
Hey, see? Thank you, Ron. He'd watch it.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would.
on
It's
board.
Tim Tebow and Johnny Manziel, the polar opposites when it comes to people.
It writes itself, and I am trying to get that off the ground, and everybody involved, the players and all that, they keep filing restraining orders.
The two of them are a Donnie Emery song. That's what they are.
Sadly accurate. Now I got to run a personal question. Well, not a personal question. A question on a personal thought that I had. As I mentioned briefly, Mike Pettine was not naming the starting quarterback early on in the year. I mean, I think it was preseason week 3, week 4 before he was able to say Brian Hoyer is the guy.
Yeah.
And it definitely seemed as though, as you said, coach is hired, then the GM is hired, then the drafting. So the GM's got his guy in the quarterback, but not in the coach. And so maybe leaning on the coach in terms of giving Johnny as much time as possible before eliminating him from starting contention. And the way I was personally reading the way this was leading into the season is let Brian Hoyer get in, fail in the first 3 games, which it was a very tough first 3 games, at least looking at the schedule. And then you could say, well, we gave Brian Hoyer his chance. He did nothing with it. Bye week is that perfect week to get Johnny Manziel to practice with the starters and then throw him on the field. Do you think that there was any idea that that was the plan at some level and that Brian Hoyer just came out and did better than expected? Or am I just creating something out of nothing? I mean, I genuinely feel as though the GM needed Johnny to work out and was putting pressure on the coach.
So I don't really know one way or the other about whether the GM, about whether Ray Farmer was putting pressure on Pettine or not, but I certainly think that was a plan. I don't know. I think ideally they would have wanted Manziel to come in and soundly beat out Brian Hoyer and be the starter week 1. And then when that didn't happen, I think they would have said, okay, well, if it's close, we can let Brian start those first 3 games and then play Manziel after the bye week. As the preseason went on and as the early season got underway, it probably became apparent to the coaches, at least, this isn't something we knew publicly, but that Manziel just wasn't going to be ready. And that I think all along their plan last year was similar to what I think their plan is this year. I think Brian Hoyer was going to be the starter, and they were just going to cross their fingers and hope that Manziel could take it away from him, just like I think this year Josh McCown is probably going to have a leg up to be the starter, but man, would they really like Johnny Manziel to take that job from him. I think Hoyer really surprised a lot of people with how well he played to start the season, and I think the coaches and especially the talent evaluators and the organization were probably at least a little bit surprised by that too.
You just brought up Josh McCown, and I'm a Bears fan, so I have a little bit of personal viewership experience when it comes to Josh McCown and the system that he can excel in. And the issue I had with the signing of Josh McCown was you went from Brian Hoyer, who was younger and had, in my opinion, a little bit more of an upswing, and went to Josh McCown, who is older than the quarterback's coach that he plays for, and then gave him just a lot of money, just way more money than I thought that he was worth, in my opinion, for journeyman backup. We already know that he's probably going to be the starter, but how did you feel about that contract total that they gave out?
So I'm pretty okay with the contract. The Browns have tons of cap space, and yeah, it's probably a little bit of an overpay, but when you have $40 million in cap space or whatever, and you don't really have any big players who are going to need an extension in the next year or two, it's okay to throw an extra million or two at a guy to make sure you get him. Remember, at the time, it wasn't just the Browns negotiating with McCown, it was the Bills too. And if the Browns wanted to make sure that they got him, what they could do was offer that little bit of extra money, which they had. And having said that, his contract really, if you look around the league at other sort of established backups, it's a little more expensive than most of them, but it's not, too crazy. It's not too much of crazy money. And especially with almost all of the guaranteed money is in the first year. So after the season, they can cut him and essentially not owe him anything. So I think the contract, when you look at just the total figures, looks a lot worse than it is in context.
Now, you guys had been very quiet in the free agency market so far, despite having all that cap. One of the main things that Kyle and I were just discussing today was the way that Jordan Cameron left the team. It seemed as though he was in Miami. Word all of a sudden was released that he was going to re-sign with the Browns. Everything seemed right with the world. And then all of a sudden, there was a report that came out. Nope, never mind. Jordan Cameron pulled out. He's going to the Dolphins. The end. Already signed his contract. Now, I have a personal feeling. I read an article, and I was already thinking this before I even saw the article on Deadspin, but the article basically explained out that Jordan Cameron had used the media to get more money and to kind of just be a jerk about it, to be honest. He wasn't very happy in Cleveland. What are your thoughts on just that kind of fiasco that seems to surround every single major move that the Browns make?
Yeah, it is. It's weird how that happens, isn't it? I think Jordan Cameron. So a lot of people, yeah, like you said, a lot of people are going to look at that as, he used the media to get more money, which I think is probably true. That's what it looks like happened. He said he was being kind of a dick about it, or I don't remember what words he used, but I actually think I'm okay with players doing that. As a player in the NFL, the deck is sort of stacked against you as far as your contract is concerned. So I have no problem thinking that teams would do the exact same thing to players without even thinking about it. So I'm not going to begrudge a guy, especially a guy like Jordan Cameron, who's had injury issues. He's still in the prime of his career, but he's probably not going to get another big contract after this one. So I don't have any problem with the guy getting all the money he can through whatever means necessary. Because, as we've seen in the NFL, the teams aren't going to throw a player a bone, and they're not going to, refrain from negotiating through the media. They're going to kick you to the curb as soon as they don't need you. So I don't view players doing that as too big of a deal.
So what do you think their plan is going to be going forward? Because most of the big free agents, they're off the board. The Browns still have some cap space left to work with. Where are they going from here? I mean, is this going to be just a build to the draft only type of thing, or are they actually going to go out and kind of try and fill a few of these needs to augment free agents against the rookies that they're going to get?
So I think sort of in contrast to the last couple of years where they were big spenders in free agency, I think they have taken a more measured approach to it this offseason. I think there have been some rumors floating around that Charles Clay was really going to be their big target this offseason. And that explains in part why they didn't tag Cameron and why they let him get away, because they thought they were going to be able to land Clay. But then when he got tagged by the Dolphins, that complicated things. And then when the Bills came really hard after him, and it seems like now he might end up there, it looks like the Browns their backup plan was Jordan Cameron, but their backup plan dried up before they could get to it. And I think there was even, I don't know if they were ever expressly linked, but there were guys like Scott Chandler floating around who now is no longer available. So I really don't know what they're going to do at the tight end position. It does seem like they're looking at bringing in a veteran corner as sort of insurance against Gilbert, K'Waun Williams, who are all three rookies last year who had variable levels of success. But even after letting Buster Screen walk, it seems like they're trying to bring in, Parrish Cox or Tramon Williams or somebody to help solidify that position across from Joe Hayden.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the way the wheels fell off, so to speak, when it comes to the offense this year. Because early on, it was maybe not game-changing, but it was definitely a competent offense, and it looked pretty darn good, and there had to be a lot of excitement. Brian Hoyer was playing well, the run game was successful, and it was exactly what was needed to manage the game and let the defense do what they need to do, and wins were happening. And it seemed to all pretty much stop as soon as Alex Mack went down with his injury. I mean, obviously he's incredibly talented. He's probably the best center in the league right now. But as soon as he goes out, it seems like the run game tanked, and then Ben Tate gets released, and now Brian Hoyer's got all this extra pressure on him, and so he's starting to throw the ball a lot more, and then Josh Gordon comes back, and he's not contributing the way he was, and now Johnny Manziel's coming in, and it all seemed to have this great domino effect. Now, is that an accurate way of remembering this, or am I off base here? I mean, is that, would you be willing to say that the offensive problem started up front with Alex Mack going out?
Partially, yeah. I think that had something to do with it. You can't replace the guy who's maybe the best center in the league. You just can't do it. But at the same time, they had a little bit of success the week after he got hurt. I think was the second Steelers game, where they really, their offense was still humming. They really took it to Pittsburgh in that game. And then it was the next week at Jacksonville where things really fell apart. But I think it was a combination of, losing Mack hurt, but I think we kind of caught teams by surprise to start the year, just how good at running the ball we were. The zone run offense, which is what the Browns were doing, usually takes a couple of years to get installed and get working right away. We were trying to hurry up installing that. We had split QB reps. I think a lot of teams didn't think we were going to be able to run the ball the way we ended up being able to run. And so that really helped set up a lot of play action passes from Brian Hoyer, who was not really expected to throw the ball much. And when he did throw, teams were so worried about the run that guys were wide open. Well, Jacksonville threw 9 guys down in the box and said, all right, let Brian Hoyer throw to beat us. And I think he was like 16 of 40 in that game for like 200 yards in it. So it was really bad. It was his first bad game of the year. And I think after that, teams had just adjusted and said, okay, well, if we keep the Browns from running on us, then the passing game is shot. And I think without Alex Mack, we weren't able to run into those 8-man boxes effectively, and that really sort of hamstrung the rest of the offense. I think it was a combination of losing Mack. It was a combination of Ben Tate kind of becoming a malcontent. It was a combination of defenses just adjusting to what was a new scheme for this team.
Now, you just said Ben Tate was being a bit of a malcontent. Could you expand on that a little bit more? Because to my knowledge, it was just there wasn't any big publicized break between him and the team. It was just, he's not performing, and so he's gone. So I mean, I was not aware of anything behind the scenes in terms of locker room presence or anything like that. Was it the right move to release him, or should he have been given more time? I mean, what do you think on this?
So I think had he never been injured to start at the beginning of the year, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I think he'd still be on the Browns. But I think once he got hurt, is when Isaiah Crowell and Terrence West both really took off. And I think Ben Tate kind of had the attitude that, he didn't want to share his reps anymore. This was his chance to be the number one running back after spending all those years behind Arian Foster. And I think, he maybe just, wasn't the most amenable teammate to the other running backs. And I don't, that's speculation on my part, but based on, a couple of hints he dropped on Twitter and interviews, it seemed like he really expected to be that number one running back and was kind of displeased when it turned out, we might have we might have to split carries three ways. I don't really think that sat too well with him. And so it was a combination of that and then him being injured again, which seems to be a problem that's followed him around, and just not being any more productive than the rookies that they brought in.
And as we just talked about, he was able to have some success, and as soon as the box was having just 8-9 guys in it and Brian Hoyer had to throw, that's when Brian Hoyer started to struggle. But he definitely started the season looking very competent, maybe just a game manager, but if that's all that's needed, that's fine. When it came time for him to be benched, I figured it was probably about right, that there were not going to be too many fans who felt that it would be a waste. I mean, at that point, as soon as you get told you're not going to the playoffs, that's when you kick the tires on your rookie. But would it have been in any way beneficial to put Johnny Manziel in earlier? And one of the reasons I ask is, being a Colts fan, I was actually very worried about the Colts-Browns game because my concern was they were going to put in Johnny Manziel. There would be no tape on him, and he's going to scramble around. And that was at that time when the Colts defense was not doing great, and the offense was stalling, and it was a close game as it was, but my belief was had Johnny Manziel been in that game, the Colts would have lost. That's speculation, obviously, but was Brian Hoyer benched at the right time, or should he have been given more time or less time? I mean, what is your take on that?
So in a vacuum, any other team, I would say he was probably benched about 3 weeks too late. But knowing what we know now about the situation with Manziel and just sort of what shape he was in as far as how ready he was to play, I'm not sure they really had a choice but to hold on to Brian Hoyer until, the very end, until he was throwing 8 interceptions in 3 games with no touchdowns. And at that point, you really don't have a choice. But I think, on any other team with a normal backup quarterback, I think he probably would have been yanked a few weeks earlier.
And briefly, I mean, we talked about Johnny Manziel, but it was more about whether he was believed to be the guy. If we're talking about his talents and his preparation, that's something that's been kind of keyed in recently, is that maybe he does not prepare well, or he doesn't execute his film study the way he should, or, any of these speculations. It's obviously all hearsay and second, third, fourth, fifth hand information. But can you give us a little bit of insight as to the perception, at least, as to whether or not Johnny Manziel is legitimately putting in the work, or if he's just really good at talking to the media and making it seem as though he's sorry? I mean, you're stuck with him for a while. You want him to work out, but is he going to actually turn a corner and work hard at this?
So I think last year at this point, there's no question that he didn't put in the amount of work that was necessary to succeed. And I don't know whether things were different in college. Everything we heard from his college teammates and coaches was that he worked hard. He does legitimately seem to be a competitive guy to care about football. But for whatever reason, he seemed to not put in the necessary work last year. And then, now it was announced that he was going to rehab, so I think we can kind of connect the dots there and think, well, he had some other problem that was getting in the way of him being the football player that, everybody wanted him to be. So it's hard to say now, once he's done with rehab, will that change the work ethic? Was that going to stick? Is he going to be a different football player coming out the other end of that? It's really, as far as I know, it's a pretty unique situation. I don't really think we have an idea yet whether or not those types of things have changed. We'll obviously know more as spring practice, spring camps, and then moving through the summer, we'll probably get a little bit of a better idea. But it's just really hard to know right now.
He's starting to remind me a lot of a Ryan Leaf. It's starting to look that way. Somebody who has shown he has all of the tools, but just can't step away from that one part of his personal life to get things going, or can't get it under control.
And you have to imagine he did not endear himself to the fans when coming out and doing the little money signs. I got to imagine that was a huge flame war on your message boards.
You know what? Some people love that, and I'll admit, if he had been playing well, I probably would have loved that. I think that was actually when he came back from his college suspension, and he immediately did that after throwing a touchdown. At that point, I was like, screw it, let's get this guy. I like that attitude. I like that extremely confident. God, I hate this word, but I can't think of a better one. I like that swagger that he brought to the team, because for a long time, and you can probably hear it when I was talking about my favorite memory earlier, there's not a lot of confidence built into the Browns organization. So I feel like to be successful on this team, we needed a guy who just thought he was the best no matter what, and he wasn't going to let anybody, tell him otherwise. Obviously, you have to back that up on the field, and it didn't happen. But I think if he plays well, I think people will love that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Brownie the Elf, who is a little used alternate logo for the Browns. But as soon as Manziel was drafted, there were photoshops of the elf doing the money sign and stuff like that. So I think,
and they were hilarious.
Yes, they were.
Great.
Let's shift into something a little bit happier here. Let's get through. We've gotten through a lot of the sorrows that is the Cleveland Browns last year.
There's a few of them.
Let's get. For example, your defense is the better unit, the more competitive unit every single week on the football field. Has had a lot of success over the last few years. Hasn't been enough for them. Is this a kind of team that identifies themselves more as a defensive team, or is it just really trying to find that balance and say, no, we're a team that can do both? What are they searching for there? Like, what is the identity of the Cleveland Browns?
So I think, ideally every team would like to do both, but I don't think at this point, I think, that identity is we're going to play great defense, we're going to run the ball, and we're not going to turn it over. So I think there's definitely a bigger focus on the defense, not in small part because Mike Patton was a defensive coordinator before he became a head coach. So that's defensive coordinators. They tend to favor that side of the ball a little bit. They like the more conservative offensive approach. So I think that's definitely going to be the identity. And not only that, but they want to be not your sort of traditional defense, but they're really being multiple, using different fronts, that kind of thing. Mike Patton cut his teeth under Rex Ryan. So that sort of defensive creativity is something that he's been able to bring to the Browns, that I think being on that cutting edge of the X's and O's is something that I think the team is really going to strive for on both sides of the ball.
All right, now let's look a little bit ahead to the 2015 season. This is another year where the Browns go into the first round with 2 first-round draft picks. It's getting to be pretty impressive how well that's. Well, I mean, the picks are there, but then it's Trent Richardson's and Brandon Whedon's, and that's. I mean, you got to use them, but you were there, I imagine for you it was Brandon Whedon, really? All right, I guess.
Actually, I hated the Trent Richardson pick way more than I hated the Whedon pick.
Really?
I did not think Trent Richardson was going to be good.
Well, actually, at this point, you can say you knew that he was not going to be good. Because as a Colts fan, I can just say, yeah, thanks for swindling the hell out of the team on that one. Although I guess the Colts did it to themselves.
I was going to say thanks for the first-round pick, but then that turned into Johnny Manziel, so we can just call it even.
And you traded up to get him. That is the funny thing. Traded up, and then he even reports, yeah, I texted the GM and said, I'm tired of waiting. And they're like, all right, yeah, let's trade up. Which sets a very odd power dynamic from the start, but I don't know if you're aware, but when asked for comment about his release, Trent Richardson said that he did not see eye to eye with the Indianapolis Colts GM. That was essentially his reason why things did not work out. What is your take on that?
My take is Trent Richardson probably thinks he's a lot better than he actually is.
That is about the most polite take you could have on that. I was really hoping for a lot more venom, but then again, he has not been your.
I call him a delusional douchebag.
I mean, at some point, you just kind of have to feel bad for the guy. I mean, think about it. You know, he was pumped up as he was going to be the next Adrian Peterson. He was, you know, a running back worth being taken with a top 5 pick, which is pretty unheard of in the modern NFL. And then to have all of that just kind of fall apart.
On Colts forums, I was reading it was a actually pretty popular viewpoint that what the Colts needed to do with the number 1 overall was draft Trent Richardson and keep Peyton Manning on board. And yeah, I mean, imagine that. I don't like thinking about it. That really makes me queasy. Oh man. Well, anyway, let's talk about this upcoming draft and all the hope that is there before it gets processed through the factory of sadness. Where are the Browns looking to go in this draft? I mean, you've got 2 picks. I believe it's number 13 and number 19. Not top 10, but still fantastic opportunity. A lot of first-round talent. Where do you think the team is going to be looking to make their selections? What are they going to be picking?
Probably to use one of those picks on a defensive lineman or, you know, maybe a linebacker, but they need help on run defense. You know, they lost a couple of guys, or at least one guy who, Ataba Rubin, who's been a decent run defender, is probably a little overrated, and they've got a lot of solid players on that defensive line, but they really don't have anybody who other teams are afraid of. And then pair that with losing Jabal Sheard, who had been a little bit of a disappointment as a pass rusher, but had been a very good player against the run. And, you know, the team really needs to sort of shore up that part of the defense because, you know, the secondary is pretty much set. They're hoping Barkevious Mingo can take a big leap forward. And, you know, Paul Kruger had a pretty good year. The linebackers look okay, but they really need somebody on that front line to really set that line of scrimmage. So I think that's probably going to be one of the picks. And then they could really go anywhere with the other pick, and it wouldn't be that surprising to me. I think receiver is probably an obvious area of need. I'm not sure, you know, the value might not work out, might not make sense wherever they decide, you know, to make that pick. Maybe, you know, the top 3 guys are gone by the time they pick at 12 and they don't value the 4th guy on their board as highly, or, you know, something like that happens. But I think receiver is still a position group that could use to be upgraded. Other than that, you know, tight end sticks out as a place that could be upgraded, but I don't really see anybody worth a first-round pick in this draft. So it's hard to tell where they're going to go with that second pick.
So where do you see this team ending up next year? You've got all these moves you can make in the draft now. You have all this cap space. You're still in this rebuild process. You have a little bit of hope going into what could be a great quarterback in Johnny Manziel, or what could be an epic failure in Johnny Manziel. What are the expectations? Because you have a unique ability to communicate directly with fans in forum on the webpage. And what is the expectation of this coaching staff, team, quarterback? What are we looking at realistically?
Everybody pretty much expects the defense to take a step forward. You know, probably not a big one. The defense is already pretty good, but we're hoping that the defense can really join that elite group of NFL defenses, you know, your Seattle's, your San Francisco's, where other teams really know it's going to be a struggle to score this week. I think our secondary is probably one of the best in the league. So I think passing against the Browns has always been difficult. So I think we're hoping that they can shore up that run defense again. On offense, nobody really knows. We know we're probably going to run the ball a lot again. Everybody's excited about Terrence West and Isaiah Crowell. The wide receiver group doesn't really inspire confidence in anybody. So I saw yesterday or the day before they're having a meeting with Dwayne Bowe, who might be a decent outside option. So I think on offense, until that quarterback position is solved, the expectations are pretty low. So I think in general, people expect to maybe see a better team this year, but I'm not sure the record will end up being all that different just because we don't know if your quarterback position is going to be any better, and that's really the limiting factor at this point.
If you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything in this league, and you are not yet sure if you truly have a quarterback back there. So right now, I'd like to open the floor up to you, give you a chance to discuss dogsbynature.com, discuss Twitter, and anything else you think we might have missed, and put yourself out there.
All right, I would just, encourage any Browns fans out there to check out Dogs by Nature. I know the comment sections can get a little heated from time to time, but I swear we don't fight. I really want to point out our stable of writers there, including Chris Picorni, the guy who started Dogs by Nature, Matt Wood, Josh Finney, a lot of other guys who've been around a long time. Make sure you check out the Dogs by Nature Twitter, and Facebook especially is a good one if you want some sillier content throughout the day that doesn't always make the website. And other than that, keep up the hope.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dan. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to make it. It seemed to kind of at the beginning there, I was like, man, I don't think we're going to get anybody for the Browns, Kyle. It's not looking good. And then you kind of jumped into the last minute on Thursday afternoon. I was like, oh, thank Jesus, we got somebody. So
Yeah, no, I saw your email, and usually when we get requests like that, somebody jumps on it right away, and I thought like, oh, I'm busy Saturday, I'll let somebody else deal with it. But then like a couple of days later, we got that second email, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, I'll do this.
We definitely appreciate you taking the time, and we certainly hope we can have you come on again, especially right after the draft. We really need to get you on and talk about the picks and whether or not you agree with them, and what the future may hold.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dan. We will definitely be in touch. That's for sure.
Cool.
Once again, that was Dan with dogsbynature.com. Very fun talking to him, even though maybe it's hard to talk about the Cleveland Browns and not make terrible jokes and drive people away. I had so many jokes, and I said none of them because I did not want to hurt his feelings and be a terrible human.
Well, the other thing is, it's tough to talk about the Browns and be excited at this point, because just a lot of the things that have happened with them over the last year or two, it just seems like whenever they just get to that point where like, all right, we might have something here, it just seems like, the hand of God comes down, and just, I feel bad for them only because I really understand their pain being a Bears fan. So I completely get it. I just don't know how you can sit there and be like, yeah, well, we're excited to bring Johnny Manziel back, because if you said that, then you obviously need to be committed.
True, but at the same time, it's one of those, that's where you're at. Not a lot of quarterbacks to be picked up, either in the draft or through free agency right now. Could they do something wacky and take Marcus Mariota? Yeah, I guess. I mean, if they're going to do that, you might as well take that number 19 pick and trade down to number 22 just to complete that circle. But I don't necessarily see that happening. But and that's the other thing, is you can only talk about the Browns and really talk about Johnny Manziel right now. And the game that he first started, it was so infuriating. You turn on the TV, it was like that was the only game being played. Like, Johnny Manziel, Johnny Manziel, Johnny Manziel, commercial, Johnny Manziel, Aaron Rodgers, Johnny Manziel, Johnny Manziel. So I imagine that Cleveland fans are pretty much over it and ready to move on, but understand that the management has to give him at least one more year.
Yeah, I think it would be doing the fans and the team a disservice to not see what you get out of a full offseason and a full, not rookie experience from him. Granted, I mean, right now, the whole rehab thing is a big deal, and I don't know if rehab can fix douchebaggery, but it's a tough thing to admit that you have a problem, which I commend him for. He obviously has an issue, and he wanted to get help for it.
Yeah, but is his issue truly substance abuse, or is it the need for attention? Because it could be argued that he went to rehab to get himself in the headlines again, and then when he comes out, he can talk about how tough it was and how much he's grown. And one of the big issues with this guy is he's excellent at manipulating opinion, mentioning, I didn't need to take things as serious, and dropping, talked with my mom. Oh, well, you talked with your mom. Clearly it's okay. I don't care about talking with mom to be a better football player. His mom is out with him and his roommate in the morning on Saturdays at like 1 a.m. getting beat up by random Cleveland dudes. No, bad times.
Well, none of it will matter when he comes back and he steps on that football field during a preseason game and just lays the biggest egg ever. That will pretty much solidify his exit. because fans will turn on him instantly, especially Browns fans. So come regular season, when he's supposed to supposedly take over that offense from Josh McCown, it's going to be very telling as to how much BS he was trying to spoon feed everybody and how much of it was real.
Definitely one of those. It can go a few ways. Almost none of them are good. Really hard to look at him with any sort of hope or anticipation, which is a troubling thing. And it's really kind of sad for the Cleveland Browns fans. All they want is to be able to feel good about turning the game on. And instead they're the Cleveland Browns, which is sad. So, hey, now that we've ripped on the team enough, those of you who are joining us from Dawgs by Nature, why don't you check out the podcast, footballisamericapodcast.com. That is our website. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, a whole bunch of others. You can email us, fbiapodcast@gmail.com. Tell us all the ways in which we need to leave your team alone, and email us and tell us how great Johnny will be, or how terrible he was and how we don't even know. Those are both good.
And let's not gloss over the fact that, once again, Dan did a great job of coming on and being a great contributor to the conversation. And I'm excited to get him back on. And despite the woes that the Browns fans and writers and everybody is feeling about that team, much like we've said about the Raiders and the Jaguars, is that you can only go up. If you think that you're at the bottom now, then you can only get better. If you don't and you think things can get worse, well, then you're a pessimist. So get out anyway. You guys have hope somewhere. You just need to find and get it, and you will. And I'm just trying to now
It'll only hurt for a little.
I'm trying to put a positive spin because Kyle and I dug into the team for like 4 minutes. So
now there's some guilt.
Yeah, now I have guilt.
There's some shame glaze to try and wash off. It's not happening.
All right, let's just kill this then. Let's wrap it before we dig out.
Thank you to everybody for tuning in.
Yep, thanks everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, good night.